Let's talk about 6 ways that we can show up better for loved ones or for anyone when they are facing tragedy, loss, or crisis. What can you specifically offer to people when they're suffering, like something that you're really, really good at? It is not your place to offer empty platitudes or to find the good in an awful situation. The world is a way better place when we show up to support each other. Hi guys, welcome back to this week's Quickie, our super fast take on all the adulting things that matter to you. Now today is really going to be a quickie because I am so fucking sick with strep throat right now, so bear with me as I work through the sickness to bring you today's episode because it's a really important one, especially after we've witnessed all of the conflict, loss, natural disasters over the last year, and the most recent being the devastating wildfires in California. So how do we show up better for people in crisis or for anyone who's going through a tragedy? Because I think a lot of the time en masse, we're getting it wrong. And I believe that humans are innately good and we are all trying our best and we want to help. But the thing is, societally, we were never taught how to help people effectively and how to really show up in a way that benefits people. Take the recent LA fires, for example. I have fallen in love with LA. It feels like a second home to me at this point. I have so many people that I care about there. And it was horrible to watch the loss and the destruction that was happening. But one of the things that was really nagging at me throughout watching this all unfold, on media and on social media, was how much I was seeing people on social media responding to posts of people's burning homes and saying, everything's replaceable. You're lucky no one got hurt. And of course, they're lucky if they weren't hurt, but that doesn't mean that's the appropriate response at that time or that that's a beneficial way to show up for people. And I see this kind of response constantly. Anytime someone is dealing with a crisis or a tragedy, this applies to natural disasters like fires, losing your home, getting burglarized, death, job loss, divorce, breakups, fertility issues, miscarriage, health issues. I see people all the time like dishing out these platitudes of, well, at least they caught the cancer early, instead of, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. I can't imagine how scary it is. Can I drive you to an appointment? How can I help? People going through failed IVF rounds or miscarriage and hearing, well, it's really common and you still have time to try again. So at least you can afford treatment, instead of saying, this must be devastating for you. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want some company? I can come over and just be with you right now. Most of the time, everyone, again, has really, really good intentions. And these are just knowledge gaps or things that we default to when we don't know what to do. We don't know what to say because, again, we were really never taught how to show up in these situations. But we can do better than this. So let's talk about 6 ways that we can show up better for loved ones or for anyone when they are facing tragedy, loss, or crisis. So number 1, offer support the right way and take the burden off of the person who is suffering. When we say, let me know how I can help, even though we mean well, we're actually putting the mental load on that person by making them come up with an ask or figure out how to respond to that when they're already struggling. So instead, say you want to help and offer what you can do. So, hey, I really want to help. I'd like to bring over a food delivery. What's the best time I can drop it off? That's concrete, that is supportive, and they don't have to think about anything. They can just say, wow, thank you so much. Or, I've been doing some research on insurance claims or places that you can stay for free if you've been displaced. Is it okay if I send you all of the best resources that I've found? And maybe they'll say, you know what, I'm good, I'm overwhelmed, I don't want that right now. And that's okay. You have done your best to offer what you have that can help them. It could also look like, I'd love to drive you to that appointment or help pick up your kids from school while you're sorting all of this out. Would that be a help to you? And then now the ball is in their park to accept the help, or maybe they're fine, but you have shown up and not put the onus on them to figure out how you can help them. Another really beautiful thing that I saw unfolding after the LA fires was people offering support that was tailored to what they're really good at. And it really struck me as this way that we can all make the world a better place using our unique gifts. So what can you specifically offer to people when they're suffering, like something that you're really, really good at? I saw photographers offering free photo sessions to families who had lost all their photos and all of their family memories in the fires. When I saw that, I cried. Like, what a beautiful thought, you know? Maybe you're not a first responder or a doctor and you can't help people in these crises on the ground. But as a photographer, what a beautiful thing to do to help people rebuild their memories in a way that they can afford. I saw therapists offering free counseling to those who had been affected by the fires, and stylists who were offering free services to help people shop for and rebuild their wardrobes if they'd lost everything in the fires, which is such a unique way to support someone in a way that maybe no one else is thinking to do that. And it really made me realize that we can uniquely support others in a way that maybe someone else might not be able to. My organized friends, they can show up for someone who is going through maybe a death or a divorce or a devastating job loss, and they're too depressed to clean their house or organize their paperwork for their taxes. And my organized friends, I'm not that person, they can show up and really move the needle on that and really help them organize their house, help them file all their things properly. What a gift that you could give to someone. My creative friends can help people capture and commemorate memories that they want to hold on to after a loss. As a writer, I can help people who've maybe lost their job and are really struggling in the job market by helping them write their resumes or their cover letters. So think about what you're good at and offer it to people. The second thing, which I will not stop yapping about, is don't bright side and silver line someone's grief. The whole things are just things. As long as you're safe and alive, you're lucky. That message that I was seeing everywhere after the fires, it wasn't helpful because people are probably already feeling grateful to be alive and grateful if their loved ones are safe. But that doesn't take away the pain that they're also feeling for everything that they've lost and all of these memories and all these precious things that sometimes you can't put a value on them. So if someone is going through that loss and they want to say, hey, you know what? I'm safe, my family's safe, that's all that matters. That's great. Good for them. That's a beautiful approach. But if you're on the outside of this crisis, it is not your place to offer empty platitudes or to find the good in an awful situation. I've experienced this a ton in my life, and it always really irks me. The number of times I heard, well, at least she lived a long life after my grandma died. And it wasn't helpful. I know how to do math. I know how long she lived, and I'm so grateful that we got to spend so much time with her. But the length of her life does not take away the pain of her being gone. So I just found that such an unhelpful thing that was constantly said by like almost everyone I know. After a really painful breakup that I had, a bunch of people said, well, better you know now than later. And someone else said, I guess you knew it was eventually coming, as if knowing that the inevitable is going to happen makes it less painful. All of those were the wrong approaches. And what would have been so much better is if someone had just said to me, this must be really hard for you, or this must be so painful. I'm here if you want to talk. I love you. That's it. We don't need to problem solve. We don't need to find the silver lining, because it really actually just gaslights people out of their right to grieve and to process a difficult thing that they're going through. So we can be grateful and suffering at the same time, and we don't need someone else to point out the silver lining for us. Maybe we'll get to that on our own eventually, but it's not for someone else to point it out. And I know that's our natural inclination, because it's hard to just sit with people in their pain. But that brings us to number 3. What we should be doing instead of those platitudes and instead of the silver lining is meet people where they are in their processing and sit with them in it. Don't assign how they should feel to them. Maybe in a year, they will be glad that they had this divorce and they will see that it made their life much better. But right now, they're in the trenches. They're in the shit. You don't need to point that out to them. You don't need to forecast that one day they'll be glad. Just let this be hard right now. One of the most powerful things that you can do for someone who's suffering is to hold space for their feelings, to ask them questions, to be a safe space for them, to open up, to talk about what they're going through, to talk about how they're feeling without judgment, instead of brushing over their grief because it feels uncomfortable to sit with someone when they're in pain. A really beautiful example I saw of that recently that like really touched me was, if any of you have seen Landman, a new show on Prime, it's actually quite good. And in the last episode of Landman, there's a scene where a girl who has tragically lost her husband is sitting with this new guy who they've developed feelings for each other, blah, blah, blah. And she's been kind of trying to hide her grief from him and not expose him to it because it's uncomfortable, because he's kind of a new relationship for her. And he sees all of their wedding photos and all of these memories that she's been looking through and realizes that she's been really grieving and suffering and trying to hide it. And he sits there with her, and she's basically saying she needs time to say goodbye to her husband who died. And rather than being uncomfortable with it, being threatened by it, just wanting to avoid that level of pain, he goes through all of their wedding photos and their wedding albums and all of their memories with her and asks her questions about them. And it's so beautiful. I cried so hard because I realized how much I've wanted that at many points in my life, for someone to not just brush over or avoid these difficult moments, but for someone to sit there and just be like, tell me about that. Tell me, share a happy memory with me about that. Tell me about that day. What was that day like for you? And he just showed up and held space for her and asked questions and was curious. And that level of care and emotional intelligence was really, really beautiful to see. And it reminded me of a dear friend of mine in LA. On my grandma's birthday, I always get pretty emotional and I miss her, and I usually bake one of her recipes. And I was staying with my friend in LA, and she knew it was my grandma's birthday. And so she went out and she got pastries that were the kind of pastries that my grandma and I loved. And we baked together, and she asked me to tell stories about my grandma so that she could learn more about her and to share some of my favorite memories. And I was so touched, because we don't often do that for people. We're so quick to like flinch away from suffering and from pain. And I get it. It's completely understandable. It's not fun. But to just be able to sit there with someone and ask them about it and to not try to fix it for them is really, really beautiful. And it reminded me of this amazing quote from Anne Lamott that sums it up perfectly. She says, "What works when someone's going through insurvivable loss is you show up and you sit with them, and you're willing to feel like shit with them, and you don't try to get them to feel any better than they do for as long as it takes them." It's a hard but powerful thing to do for someone. That brings us to number 4, which is a practical thing that you can do when someone is in crisis, and that's depressurize your communication. So of course, we're reaching out to the people we care about, and we're wanting to make sure they're okay. We're wanting to send condolences. We're wanting to send help. But someone who's going through a tough time is likely being inundated by messages, and that can add a lot of additional anxiety and stress. So anything that you can do to remove that extra stress is really helpful. Maybe if you're part of a big group of friends or family, streamline your group texts so they aren't getting unnecessary clutter and convos and hearing from every single person. Maybe you hear from one person in the group text, and then everyone gets a response and everyone knows what's going on, so they don't have to respond to 10 different people. And then also, when you reach out, add the caveat that there's no pressure to respond right now, and that you're there anytime they have time and capacity to talk, and that you're there for them, but they don't need to feel any obligation. That alone is huge. I've really appreciated when I'm struggling, when I hear from people and they just say, "Hey, I'm thinking of you. I'm here to talk. I want to be, I want to know how you are," but there's no pressure at all to respond right now, whenever you're ready. The 5th thing that's really beneficial in times of crisis is avoid speculation. So whether someone is dealing with a natural disaster, a health crisis, their home was robbed, or they've lost a really important job to them, we as humans are storytellers, and we're quick to want to fill in all of the gaps and to help play detective, and in some case to help play conspiracy theorist. But it's usually not helpful, because exaggeration or theorizing on the why and the how and the what it could mean, it might just heighten anxiety, and it definitely spreads misinformation and pulls focus on what really matters in that moment. So try to stick with the facts only. Anything else is not helpful in a crisis. And last, but certainly not least, play the long game when it comes to showing support. Everyone shows up with food and condolences and flowers right after the funeral, or right after the unexpected breakup or the scary diagnosis. But who's showing up a month later? when the dust has settled, the shock has worn off, and the grief and the overwhelm and the new reality has started to set in. And that person probably feels really fucking alone. People will be bombarded with support immediately after an event. And that in itself can actually be pretty overwhelming when you're going through a tough time. Be the person who checks in a low pressure way every week for like months afterwards. Put it in your calendar, a reminder to just check in every Monday on the person who's going through something. Be the person who sends food or a cute little gift or reminder a month later, just so the person feels remembered and thought about. Who schedules plans to get together so that the person has something to look forward to, that they know they're still cared about, that they know they're still in people's minds and they're less alone. Be the person who shows up a month or two later and says, hey, do you want help like cleaning your house or running errands, or, you know, if anything's feeling really difficult right now, how can I help you? That support that comes long after the tragedy has occurred is going to mean the world to the person who's going through it. I really hope this helps. I know it's really hard to know what to do when someone is going through a rough time. But the world is a way better place when we show up to support each other, especially if we show up in ways that can really, really help that person. If you have any questions or thoughts on this, you can always hit me up on social at Teach Me How to Adult Media, and we can keep this conversation going. Sending you all lots of love, hoping that you are safe and you're well. You've got this.